Shooters, especially FPS games, have meant a lot to me over the years. My introduction to the most popular genre of video games came pretty early on in my life when I cut my teeth on the phenomenon that was Halo Combat Evolved. I spent summers in multiplayer deathmatches and lobbies filled with friends. Halo took the world by storm and is a large reason why Xbox was able to break into the competitive home console market. This early experience defined how I viewed the genre. Halo was the lens through which I viewed shooters. It had everything I valued in those types of games. Great control, a compelling narrative, and incredible gunplay. Halo was the reference point, and I didn't really consider anything that came before it, believing that anything those games did, Halo had come along and did those things better. Luckily for my younger, dumber self, I started making content and began to fill in the significant gaps that I had in my gaming history. While I was dismissive of boomer shooters like Doom, my arrogant dismissiveness turned into curiosity. Doom was universally regarded as a hallmark of gaming history, and the pedestal on which it sat loomed large. It was time to see what Doom could teach me about a genre that defined a large part of my gaming experience. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Unlockables podcast, the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. As always, I am your host. My name is Eric. I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in. Wherever, whenever in time and space you might be located, it means so much to me that you are here, stopping by, checking out the show, seeing what is going on in the world of video games. Before we get on to our episode today, I would just like to remind you at the top, as I always do, to check out the show Linktree, linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast, to catch up with the show, keep in touch, see what we're doing. You can find links to all of my social medias, all my social media profiles there. You can find the link to the Unlockables Discord, where we have a growing community of people who love to talk about video games. You can find links to the YouTube channel, which I plan to release more content on as the days go by. So please drop by the YouTube and leave a like and subscribe. And last but not least, you can find the Unlockables Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can support the show and get access to extra goodies that I do and put up there from time to time. You can get access to all the episodes early, sometimes months before they air. This episode will be out in October, and I probably posted it back in July or August when I finished it. So yeah, if you, for $1 a month, you can get really, really early access to Unlockables episodes before any of your other friends, and you can brag to them about that, I guess. So yeah, once again, that is linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. Go and check all that out. With that out of the way, let us rip and tear into our game today. And that is none other than the 1993 phenomenon that was Doom. Doom is a first-person shooter developed and published by id Software for MS-DOS and the first installment of the Doom franchise. It was released on December 10th, 1993 in North America. It was the third major independent release by id Software after Commander Keen and Wolfenstein 3D, and it was designed in a new 3D engine created by the legendary game maker John Carmack. Carmack is, like I said, legendary in the history of gaming. His influence is as wide and long as it is tall. He could honestly warrant an entire episode all on his own for all of his use of many pioneering techniques in the area of computer graphics, in the area of game design, for his innovative, cutting-edge skills that he was always showcasing on all of his projects. That is not this episode. I think to do that justice, that would have to be a very, very heavily researched episode. John Carmack created the game alongside John Romero, who also could warrant an entire episode dedicated to himself. But again, that's not why we're here for this episode. We're here to talk about Doom, and I have a limited amount of time. Maybe one day, if I got some time, I'll do a sweeping historical review of what John Carmack and John Romero did for the history of video games. Doom was published under 3 episodes and distributed with the use of shareware, where they gave away the first episode for free to kind of build up hype. And then there was a full retail version with an additional episode published in 1995, known as Ultimate Doom. Doom was both a critical and commercial success. It was estimated that it sold about 3.5 million copies by 1999, and up to 20 million people had played it within 2 years of release. That's the shareware model for you. So guarantee you not everybody either A, bought the full game, or 2, found a way behind the shareware stuff to be able to just get access to the full game for free. By 1995, it was estimated that Doom was installed on more computers than Microsoft's new Windows 95 operating system. Doom has a reputation as one of the best and most influential games ever made, being given the moniker father of first-person shooters, while Wolfenstein would be considered the grandfather. It is also credited with exploding the modding scene, as tech-savvy players would go on to design their own Doom levels, and Carmack mentions the sheer number of player-created levels was incredibly overwhelming to all of them. There were thousands and thousands of incredible user-submitted levels. And Doom also contributed to the birthing of speedrunning as a concept, as the fast movement pace and level layouts allowed players to kind of race around and see who would complete levels the fastest. There's a timer at the end of every Doom level. The movement is incredibly fast. It allows for some insane pathing through levels and some really insane optimized gameplay. Doom also turbocharged the early online communities, as there was 2 multiplayer modes. So this kind of shifts my timeline and my experience of what my personal experience with the internet is. I didn't really experience the internet until probably the late 90s or early 2000s. So that's kind of just when I thought the internet became more widespread, more mainstream. But as early as 1993, you were able to play Doom online and share levels with people. And this started early online communities. So 6 or 7 years before I really experienced them, or my memory of the internet kind of comes into play, people were playing Doom online. People were forming online communities around Doom for speedrunning and for sharing their own levels. Obviously, Doom's themes with all of the hell and demon stuff were met with controversy as the video game industry continued to grow and people started to pay more attention to what was in the games that people were playing. All the hell and demon stuff obviously stirred a response from the more conservative factions of parents, organizations, the government, and these conversations would continue with things coming up like Night Trap and Mortal Kombat and other games that kind of continued to push the boundaries of what video games could be. Doom was one of those games that began to shift that public perception. And as you know, out of all of this kind of pushback and satanic panic and all this stuff, that is where we eventually got the ESRB that puts all the ratings on the video games as we clearly see them. So Doom is kind of a part of that legacy of those games that made people take a look at what was actually being in those games, and then kind of having the industry come up with this ratings board to be able to independently review and rate games so that people at least knew when they were picking them up off the shelf what was in them. So as always, I begin with my personal experience with the game that we're talking about, and I don't have a lot of personal experience right off the bat with Doom specifically. Doom 2016 is the only entry in the entire series that I had played up until this point. I did play Quake a couple of years ago, and as I understand, I saw some similarities between Quake and Doom, and I might touch on that a little bit as I talk about my experience with Doom. But Doom by itself, I had always kind of just heard reference in as a game from the 90s that was kind of this big deal. So I'll talk about Doom a little bit, and I'll talk about my history with FPS first-person shooters a little bit too, because that's not something that I've really had the chance to do too much, not nearly as much as my history with RPGs. And next to RPGs, I would consider the FPS first-person shooter, even third-person shooter, maybe shooter genre in general, as among the most influential in the early years of me playing video games. I have played a decent amount of them. It's difficult to pin down which game was my first, but my most vivid memories of my introduction to the genre were around Halo, and that's what I consider my introduction to the genre. Halo seemed like such a revelation when it came out, and I must have played it at my cousin's or somewhere. But when it came out, it was a big deal. Halo was like the second thing since Pokemon came out in 1998 that I really remember taking over. It was not quite in the all-encompassing, dominating way that Pokemon had taken over, because obviously Pokemon had the benefit of games and the anime and the cards and the toys and all of the stuff that went with Pokemon as a brand. It had a much wider reach into retail stores as games and toys and all that stuff. Halo, among gamers with consoles, it was absolutely huge. I remember so distinctly being entranced by Halo's gameplay and enthralled by its narrative. Shooting things I had played before were mostly limited to things like Contra or Life Force for the NES, but that's like a side-scrolling shooter, and Life Force is more of like a shmup in the same vein as like Gradius. So to see Halo, a shooting game, do things on such a grand narrative scale and have this fast competitive multiplayer aspect to it that was so addicting was something that I didn't expect games to be able to do. Around this time, I had just played Final Fantasy IX, and I really just kind of started to understand that games could have this incredible narrative scope in terms of RPGs. But then to kind of see that in a game where you're just shooting stuff with a gun like Halo has a very distinct and rich lore behind it, and the way that that story was delivered in Halo Combat Evolved, and combine that with the incredible gameplay and the amazing campaign missions and the addictive multiplayer, it was again something that I didn't expect games to like be able to do. I was still relatively young at that age, so I didn't really experience that. After my exposure to Halo, I started to pick up shooters, first and third person, both of them, kind of as they exploded in popularity. I played Medal of Honor Frontline, was a pretty early one. I remember Medal of Honor Frontline and Rising Sun. I played Call of Duty Big Red 1, 2, and 3, Halo 2, and Gears of War specifically was what convinced me to switch over from being a PlayStation boy and get an Xbox 360. That experience by itself was able to rip me out of the PlayStation ecosystem. I remember playing Gears in my friend's house, and it was late at night. We turned off all the lights, and it was like raining, and there was a thunderstorm outside, and then just the environment and the atmosphere that Gears of War was able to create. That Xbox 360 era was awesome. I mean, we always joke about how, everything's brown and it's like all color and washed out, but that shit was awesome. And to this day, Gears of War is one of my favorite games just because of like the memories I have of playing it by myself and with friends, and just kind of the atmosphere and the tone it's able to create with the gameplay and the story. And then obviously after that, I got absolutely swept up in the craze that was Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 1, and Black Ops 2. Those games came out when I was in high school, a very formative time in my life, and everyone was playing them. Nerds, jocks, boys, girls. Those games like demolished societal barriers, and everybody was just playing with everyone. The last great FPS obsession I had was when Overwatch came out. When that game came out, I played it for hundreds of hours with friends, with family, with anyone that would play. I spent time in ranked. It was the first game where I like actually practiced like getting good at the game, and I felt like I was actually pretty good at it. And then I also had a brief obsession with Destiny. At the height of my Destiny fixation, I had like 3 maxed out characters. I was running multiple raids every week. It really was a lifestyle. So the reason I'm giving you all this background info is to allow you to see the lens through which I view this genre, arguably the most popular in gaming right now. Halo was the foundation of my FPS knowledge. That is where I cut my teeth on the genre. That is where I learned like the basic strategies of like playing FPS games, movement and circle strafing and all the stuff that came along with that. I hadn't grown up with Doom, with Quake, with Unreal Tournament, or any other of these like Twitch shooters that paved the way for what the genre has transformed into today. I was really proud that Halo was the basis for my experience. And when I heard anyone talk about like the so-called boomer shooters, you can see me doing quotes if I had a video, like Doom and Quake, I was kind of like dismissive of them and like scoffed at their impact. I was like, oh, they're like, how can they be that important? I'd played Halo. I'd played Call of Duty, games that changed the industry, a game that's responsible for its platform's existence. That was the best of what the genre had to offer. What was the big deal about Doom? Why did everybody keep talking about it after I'd entered this video game podcasting group, after I started making content? Like, just anytime shooters came up, everybody was so just on about how great Doom was, and nobody wanted to talk about the games that I had played. It was always just Doom and Quake and all these games that had come before. And so I was kind of resentful of them and dismissive of them because I felt that my experiences were the ones that like we should be talking about. Well, age and doing this podcast have provided me some perspective, thankfully, and I felt like I've grown as a person over the last couple of years in terms of like having children and being a dad and like being more intelligent about the way that I talk about my experiences and kind of identifying what makes me feel about them the way that I do. I'm not as ignorant or dismissive of the gaming experiences I didn't have as I used to be. And that extended to a lot of things, not just Doom and not just Quake. I used to feel that way about like Ocarina of Time and just all these games that people would talk about that were like, they're these great games. And I'm like, yeah, but I played these games and they're just as great. I have these great experiences. I used to kind of like dismiss those. And now that ignorance is largely replaced with curiosity, as I kind of seek to better understand the history of video games and understand my relationship with the games I have played and the opinions I have about them just a little bit better, and to kind of understand where all these games line up in broader context of the history of the medium that I've come to love. I set out to play Doom for the first time with a curious eye. I wanted to see why it was constantly praised. I wanted to see how it measured up to the experiences I had growing up, with the expectation that I would find a game that started the genre on its path, only to be refined and defined by things like Halo and Call of Duty. What I found was shocking and surprising when I played it for the first time. And I'll say this as kind of setting the stage for the episode to come. Doom is what I call a foundation game. The things that make Doom what it is were so influential, so revolutionary, that it has formed the solid bedrock foundation for which the rest of the genre has rested on basically since 1993. The mechanics and the identity that are the core of what make it so much fun to play are, in some way or another, at the heart of every modern FPS or third-person shooter that I have personally ever played. What began as a journey of curiosity quickly became a pilgrimage through which my understanding of the genre that I spent so much time with changed forever. And the rest of this episode, I'll kind of walk through the way that I evaluate FPS and the things that I really value in an FPS that make it fun to play. But before we get to my thoughts on what Doom does well or doesn't do well, let's hear from the Unlockables community, who have once again submitted audio recordings to be heard on this episode.
Hello, this is Chris Copleen from the Retro Hangover Podcast. Doom. Oh, Doom. What is there to say about Doom? What can I possibly say about Doom? So much has been said about Doom. This game that came out in 1993 was probably the biggest game I didn't give a shit about when it initially came out. It was on PC, and the PC was a different world back then. It wasn't as attached to the term video games at that time. It was mostly for your word processing programs, your clip art, your various things that help people do work. Now, there had always been games, of course, and a lot of big franchises and games that influenced the console scene started on PC, and they were all there. Games like Ultima, games like Wizardry, Might and Magic. I don't know. I mean, there's a ton. Duke Nukem, the original. You have entire Sierra games, King's Quest. but none of them really resonated with gamers the same way that Doom did on a massive scale. I might be missing one, but Doom was that special game that really let people know that you could also game on PC. Yes, WASD wasn't a thing yet. You had to use the arrow keys on your keyboard and spacebar to do all the other things and other buttons to shoot. I can't remember the full details. It wasn't as easily accessible as it is today. Nothing was fully just standardized the way that we have video games and first-person shooters today. Oh, by the way, on that note, first-person shooters. This was that game. This was the game that introduced first-person shooters to a wide scale. I know there might be people that say, well, what about Wolfenstein 3D? What about it? I think Wolfenstein's biggest contribution to the first-person shooter genre at this point in history, this point in time, even though it was big in its own right, is I think you even look back, and I think when Doom landed, even in 1993, the reason people cared about Wolfenstein 3D is because it was the game that was made by the same people who made Doom. That's what gave it a leg up. Now, where do I fit into all this? Where is my thoughts on Doom? And again, I didn't give a shit about it in 1993. But I did give a shit about it when it started coming out to the Super Nintendo. When I started looking at the 32X. Wasn't enough to get me over there, oh god no. And it was also a big deal over on the Jaguar. I remember when this game came to the Super Nintendo and how big it was and how I just remember wanting to purchase it because it was the just scandalous game. It was the violent game. It was the game that your parents shouldn't allow you to play because it's going to make you it's going to make you a Satan-worshipping hellspawn that's going to cause problems for all of humanity. And what I love that id Software did is that they doubled down on every single one of those accusations and just made it more ridiculous and more violent and more crazy. The only way that you really should approach censorship in any given case. This was the 90s to a T. This is what it was like back then. And now, what is Doom? It is the game that you want to play on a pregnancy test or your home refrigerator. And can it play Doom is now the meme beyond all memes. Everyone's trying to port it. One of the most important games of all time. It still holds up. It's still a lot of fun. I haven't talked a lot about playing it because I think I know you will, Eric. And I think if you haven't played it at this point, you're truly missing out on an experience. Even though I can even fully admit it's probably not for everyone, it hasn't aged the best, but I think it's still a good time today. And it shows you the true lineage of how games evolved for many players and what really became a mainstay within the gaming zeitgeist for now over 3 decades. So thanks again, Eric, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Talk about Doom, 1993 Doom, released on the PC. This game was great and revolutionized first-person shooters till the end of time. It is still considered one of the best first-person shooters ever made, and with good reason. It has tight controls, solid level design, amazing enemy designs, and just a killer metal soundtrack. Is that Metallica? Never mind, who cares? It's great. It started an amazing series that still exists to this day with the most recent Doom: The Dark Ages. So, if you want to play a classic first-person shooter, I can't recommend Doom enough. Bye-bye.
Hi, folks. Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon here from the Reignite and Funny Games podcasts. I just wanted to share my quick thoughts on Doom, the 1993 original. I played the PlayStation version of this game, which I can't recall if there were a ton of differences between that and the PC version. I know that I played it on PC when it came out at some point, but my stronger memory is the PlayStation version in the giant jewel cases for the PlayStation games, the vertical ones that were much taller, that looked like really weird DVD cases. before DVD cases were a regular thing too. I really loved it. I would play it with one of my best friends, Matt. Yes, I had a best friend named Matt growing up, who I still have as a friend. Yes, it gets confusing. But he had a PlayStation, an original PlayStation in his basement, where also his grandfather's room was, and often we would hang out with his grandfather. And when his grandfather was either napping or kind of puttering about, we would play this game. And he never understood why we played it. Shout out to Grandpa Ace. But yeah, I remember really liking this game. It's funny too, because I had this narrative as I got older, especially in college, of not liking first-person shooters, even though I played them growing up. I've come back around to them. I recently just played through Doom Eternal, which I had not played before. Shout out to that awesome game. But yeah, I love the original Doom. I love the visceralness of it. I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack absolutely still slaps, even as basic as it is. I love the combat. There's no up and down aiming. You just automatically shoot stuff because of the way that the linear design of the game is and how everything is really flat. It's just like visual tricks to make it look like there are different levels. Really brilliantly done, and kind of, I think, a master class in game design now. But yeah, I mean, it's fast-paced, it's frenetic, the music's great, the combat's great. It's challenging and can get rote, but though I don't remember ever beating it back then, though I've beat it since, I do remember spending tons of hours playing this game and really loving it. So shout out to the original Doom and to OG FPSs everywhere. And yeah, bye-bye.
All right, thank you so much to everybody that submitted recordings to be heard on the episode. Thank you guys so much. It really, really means a lot to me that you're willing to take a couple minutes out of your incredibly busy schedules to be able to contribute and participate in the episodes in the limited way that I'm only to have people participating in the episodes. It really means a lot, and I think it's really enhanced a lot of the episodes that have already come out. So thank you guys so much for being willing to participate in that, and look forward to more correspondence from the Unlockables community. Now, Doom. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about FPS and the way that I think about FPS when I analyze it, critically view it through the lens of video game analysis. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying. And in order to do this, I'm not going to walk through dev history. I'm not going to walk through, you jump around and you shoot this big gun, and that you have the shotgun and the BFG and the demons come at you, blah, blah, blah. Not going to do all that stuff. I want to talk about the core elements of FPS and the things that I think make a good FPS game. And there are many things that I would think about when I consider what makes an FPS shooter game great. And there's certainly more than one way to go about it. I'm not the arbiter of opinion. I'm not saying that my opinion or analysis is the correct or only one, but this is the way that I like to think about it. And to me, I think there are three elements in a shooter that I value the most and I think make a shooter good, and those are movement, number one, level/map design, number two, and weapons/enemies, number three. I will be talking about these elements strictly in relation to the single-player Doom experience that I played for this episode, but they can be applied to a multiplayer experience as well. I call this the FPS triangle. Three sides of the triangle that make up a good, strong FPS game: movement, level, map design, and weapons, enemies. Now, you could apply that to a lot of other genres of video games, right? This could be applied to platformers because movement, level, map design, and weapons, enemies are important in a good platformer as well. But I think in the realm of gameplay for FPS specifically, these three things are core into what makes one of these games fun. Noted that I kind of left off talking about any narrative stuff because narrative to me in a FPS game is just added. It's an added bonus, right? Because an FPS game does not need a strong story/narrative to be like the foundation from which it rests on. To me, an RPG can have somewhat, how do I say this? I want my gameplay in an RPG to be good, but I'm willing to forgive certain things in an RPG if the narrative and the story are really strong. Gameplay things weigh much more heavily in my consideration of what makes good FPS rather than story stuff. So, if Halo's story, wasn't that good, but Halo was still, really fun to play, I would still think Halo was, really fun, if that makes sense. So, movement, level, map design, and weapons, enemies. Let's talk about those three things. Let's talk about movement First, movement goes a long way in defining how your shooter plays. This goes in both directions. Slower paced movement or an environment where movement is limited or punished can encourage like a turtling or a camping style of gameplay. And if you played Call of Duty in the 2010s or any shooter in the 2010s, you know one fact to be true is that everybody fucking hates campers. People that just sit in one spot in the map and just lock down and just are like the least skillful gameplay campers were the scourge of the fucking planet, right? Like, fuck campers. On the opposite end, cranking movement up to 11 can create a ridiculously high skill ceiling and encourage constant motion rotations and like awareness of your surroundings. And not everybody likes to play like a cracked out tweaker, like swinging your mouse, like moving your mouse like 1 inch and like you fucking like do a 900-degree turn. Like, that's a different style of gameplay. Not everybody likes that. So your FPS will largely be defined on how you hone in on like what you want your movement to be. Despite being made in 1993, I have to say that Doom is one of the fastest shooters, if not one of the fastest games I have ever played. Doom's speed of movement and momentum is like the beating heart of its identity. You go from like standing still to full speed very quickly, and nothing slows you down that is not like a wall, pit, or an enemy, like something that's designed to just like stop you from moving completely. Acceleration and momentum are maintained across jumps, across slopes, across different types of terrain, unless you're running into like a ledge that is supposed to be like jumped up, or you're running to like a monster that just stops your progress like dead in your tracks. Doom encourages and is built around constant and continuous movement, from strafing to circling, engaging and then disengaging to deal with the hordes of enemies that will pile into rooms, block off hallways, and ambush you in the labyrinth-like level design. I think this fast-paced movement and this fast-paced action, along with the shooting, is one half of Doom's identity, and the setting is the other. I mean, fast plus demons equals Doom, and I think that's a very fantastic and simple formula that it follows to great effect. I think of movement a lot when I think about shooters, Halo's deathmatch feel, Titanfall's fast-paced parkour, Gears' kind of heavy third-person action where when you roadie run to and get into cover, those guys feel very, very heavy, but it feels very good. Call of Duty's precision. When I think of precision, I think of Call of Duty and how precise that gunplay felt when Call of Duty 4 came out. And all those things I think about, like, Doom kind of rolls all that stuff into one, and it starts with movement. And that is why I said earlier, like, that's why I feel so many of these legendary franchises still stand on the shoulders of Doom when it comes to movement, because Doom is what popularized and made that fast-paced style of movement work. So that's movement. Second, we have level/map design. A shooter's levels/maps are integral to its feel. Sure, you can have all the best movement and gunplay that you want, but if it's just taking place in like a flat plane or a boxed room with no variations in elevation, that gets boring pretty quick. Level design and layout make movement and combat complicated. It provides nooks and crannies for enemies to hide in. It provides a labyrinthine structure to get lost in. It provides changes in elevation for you to get advantageous angles on enemies. The layout of a room you're fighting in can have almost as much influence on how that battle takes place as the room itself. Doom's levels are a maze of hallways, open arenas, and elevation points that wrap around themselves, and this works utterly brilliantly in combination with the game's fast-paced action. You're at times fighting hordes of demons while exploring the level simultaneously just to stay alive, and level knowledge complements movement and allows you to move uninhibited without second guessing where you're going. So if you're fighting demons and they're like pouring into this hallway, rather than just like stopping to like figure out where you are, if you know the levels in Doom very well, you can just be like, I'll just back out of this hallway, I'll wrap around here, I'll go up this slope here, and I can get kind of like a a view on them can help you handle enemies on the higher difficulties rather than just being really good at the movement. Your knowledge of the levels can complement how good you are at the movement and help you take on the harder difficulties of the game. And I was utterly shocked at the size and scope and how tricky and intricate the levels in Doom were. There were so many times where I was convinced I fully explored a level, only to leave it and see on like the after action report screen that I missed like 7 secrets and 4 enemies and 2 items. Some of the rooms and secrets are incredibly well hidden, providing some incentive for replay value beyond just replaying it for the action. There's also a par time shown on each level end screen, and some of these times are like insanely fast. I would spend 10 minutes in a level, like going through everything, making sure I was really thorough, and I wanted to explore every nook and cranny and make sure I fought and killed every enemy. So it would be like 10 minutes, and then the par time would come up, and it would be like a minute and a half. And I think that really showcases how much you can master the fast movement combined with level knowledge and gameplay skill to race through the game. I mean, like I said at the top of the episode, this was an important step in the history of speedrunning, and they put par times in the game, and they're incredibly fast. So, like, I couldn't imagine getting through some of these levels I spent like 10, 15 minutes in like 2 minutes. That's absolutely insane. But if you know the level layout, if you know where you're going, if you know what you need to grab and the enemies you need to kill along the way, all that combines into being able to move through these levels incredibly fast. And that's the reward for gaining map knowledge and gaining movement proficiency. These levels that had all this extra stuff in them and all these secrets to find and all these enemies to kill, and that after action report that showed me what I missed if I missed any enemies or items, this was added incentive for exploration. It made me appreciate each level a little bit more and made me spend more time in each level than I normally would have. Like normally once I found the way out, it's like, I'm out, give me the next one. But I wanted to find all the enemies. I wanted to find all the secrets and all of the items. And usually in a shooter, I don't really find that stuff that important, but Doom had those extra little incentives in there because finding those things could potentially help you in later levels. Maybe a secret had like the really powerful plasma gun, or maybe it had like the BFG. I mean, finding that could tip the scales in any really hard battle that was to come. Level design has started to morph more into overall world design when it comes to single player and campaign offerings for shooters. Halo took the tight maze-like corridors of Doom and early shooters and exploded them into gigantic levels that made you feel like you were literally exploring an alien world. Titanfall's design needed to accommodate not only fast-paced parkour action, but room for gigantic robots to slug it out on the battlefield. Destiny's level design incorporates MMO-like mechanics for players to cooperate and overcome naturally occurring PvE events and challenging raids. And I see that evolution of world and level design in FPSs, again, resting on the foundation that Doom established. I also, if I could shout this out too before I move on to the final point, I also really love the progression of the level's thematic design as you progress. You start off on like a high-tech space base on the planet Mars, very like sci-fi futuristic, right? But as like the severity of the situation comes into focus and you progress throughout the game, there's like more and more hell like elements that start to bleed into the level design. So like halfway through the game, you kind of having these like half sci-fi, half hell inspired levels until the third episode where you literally go to hell itself and you have like this full on like hell demon architecture. So I really like that the level design gives you the sense of progression throughout the game, even though there's very little story in the original Doom. Like you get the concept of I'm a dude on Mars, on a planet, on some sci-fi thing, fighting hell demons, and the further I progress through the game, the levels start to twist and warp until I'm literally in hell itself. Really, really awesome on the level design there. And third, the third side of the FPS triangle I call weapons / enemies, and this goes into gunplay as well, how the weapons feel to shoot. You can have the best movement and level design that you want, but if you don't have fun weapons to shoot or fun enemies to shoot them at, then those two other things doesn't matter. You're not playing a shooter, you're playing a platformer. Now let's go over some of the weapons in Doom 1993, right? You have the fists, the chainsaw, the pistol, the shotgun, the chain gun, the rocket launcher, the plasma rifle, and the BFG 9000. Of course, BFG stands for Big Frickin' Gun. I don't know why I'm censoring myself there, even though I swore earlier in the episode, but gotta try and keep it PG-13. There are a few different ways weapons interact with enemies and their environment in shooters. Most of the weapons in Doom operate on one of two systems, hit scan or projectile. Hit scan weapons hit or miss as soon as the trigger is pulled, and because of this, they are unable to be dodged. You know right when that trigger pull happens whether you hit or miss an enemy, because it's not the actual projectile that is hitting an enemy, it's the game sensing if your cursor is on the enemy when the trigger is pulled, and they register that as a hit. Melee and bullet-based weapons work like this. The game isn't actually checking to see if that actual projectile hit the enemy. The game is just checking to see if your aim or your reticule is lined up with that enemy when you pull the trigger. So this is for weapons like the pistol, the chain gun. Monster melee attacks work this way. Projectile-based weapons actually produce a projectile that travels through the physical space and needs to hit the target to be effective. This is your plasma rifle, your rockets, the BFG. The weapons in Doom are fantastic and they are iconic. They are all about feeling powerful. And I found myself using all of them at one point or another, which is not something I can say about a lot of shooters. Usually I find one that I like or a few that I like, and I just stick to them and get really good with that set of weapons. The weapons in Doom are so much fun to cycle through and experiment with it. It feels amazing to have the BFG with you when you find it and just be able to like annihilate an enemy in one shot when that enemy would normally like be a bullet sponge. So I found myself hanging on to the BFG shots unless I was in like a really tight spot to kind of clear out enemies. Weapons are that third piece of the puzzle. They work in tandem with movement and level design to create the whole experience. Now, as you're darting around and figuring out the level layout, you're also using weapons to kill demons, and you're mostly doing that while continuing to move. You're strafing and you're firing shots, you're firing rockets from a higher elevation, you're getting up close and personal with a shotgun blast, then quickly retreating before you get overwhelmed. Finding a secret room and getting a powerful weapon can tip the balance of a tough level in your favor. The 3B of this part of the triangle also is the enemies, right? How the enemies react to how you engage them is also a part of this. The general AI in Doom will just have enemies that constantly track towards you. Infected soldiers will either try to hit you with melee or have shotguns that blast you. Imps have a mix of fireball projectiles and melee attacks. Demons are limited to melee attacks only, but are very fast. They will close that distance with you. The cacodemons are terrifying floating meatballs that are like slow but have strong projectile and physical attacks if you aren't careful. By the end of the game, you're often dealing with more than one of these enemy types at a time. So part of the game is being able to quickly identify what the enemies are, what they do, and the best way to respond using your movement skills, the arsenal that you've gathered, and the level design to your advantage. And there's the three sides of the triangle. And there are also boss fights that conclude each episode, like the Spider Mastermind, which is like the spider demon who masterminded the invasion that really kind of tests all of your skills and test your arsenal up until that point. So that brief rundown of the gameplay of Doom is the usual format I use when elevating shooters or FPS games. To me, the movement, the gunplay, and the levels which all this takes place are the most important elements when it comes to the games I've played in this genre. Again, if they have a fantastic narrative and story, that's just an added bonus. Halo has this expansive lore and narrative that I think only serves to enhance that game by providing the context for which all the stuff around you is happening. And speaking of lore and narrative, let's touch on that briefly next. So plot, lore, narrative. I just want to touch on this quickly because I feel like the narrative about Doom and the Doom guy has grown over time. It wasn't something that was initially established, although the idea for it was kind of around while they were developing the game. I feel like at this point, Doom is in the cultural zeitgeist. I feel like a lot of people who maybe haven't even played Doom are familiar with what it is and what its setting is, and the Doom guy, as I think we're calling him, the Doom guy, right? While this game was being designed, one of the designers, hey, we are going to get a little bit of a dev history here. One of the designers named Tom Hall created something called the Doom Bible, which was like the master design document. And this detailed the plot, the lore elements, the design goals of the project. A good chunk of the Doom Bible, which now that I'm thinking about it, a document named the Bible that has a bunch of like satanic stuff in it is really ironically funny. A good chunk of that Doom Bible was dedicated to the story of the game. It established like this sci-fi horror action setting where there were scientists on the moon and they opened a portal causing an alien invasion, and the player would go and discover that the aliens were actually demons, and the levels would become increasingly infected with hell stuff as the game went on. John Carmack, in one of the things that I probably disagree with him on, in his infinite wisdom, didn't like the idea. He actually dismissed the idea of a story in the game altogether by saying, quote, "Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important." Which I gotta say, John, I kind of disagree with you on there. Story is something I value very heavily in the games that I play. But at this time, this wasn't as uncommon of a position as you might think. Miyamoto, very famously, was not a fan of RPGs. Miyamoto was very much about making a game that was fun to play first and foremost, and not really worrying too much about having a very rich and deep story. So this was not uncommon at the time. Carmack and Romero wanted to focus on the more technical side of the game, and John Romero eventually rejected the Doom Bible entirely, wanting a game that was way, way, way more brutal than what Wolfenstein was, and it played much, much faster. Poor Tom Hall, he saw more of his designs rejected. He grew frustrated that even though he was a lead designer, basically all of his ideas were getting struck down. None of his ideas were getting taken seriously. And the other members of the team felt like he wasn't really meshing with the overall vision, the overall direction that the game was going. So id Software ended up firing him in July of 1993. And this is where Sandy Peterson would come on to help finish up the game only 10 weeks before it was set to release. Despite how John Romero basically rejected the Doom Bible in its entirety, it's funny to see that even though all of Hall's ideas were like seemingly rejected, the initial premise that he came up with about scientists opening a portal and a demon invasion ended up being the setting that Doom would take place in, except the game would take place on Mars and in Hell itself. There really wasn't a lore reason in the game as to why this was happening, or who even the Space Marine, the character, played as was, or what his motivations were. Having only played this in Doom 2016, it seems like the Doom lore would be fleshed out a lot in later games. I especially feel like the lore and narrative aspect of it was really focused on in Doom 2016 a little bit more, to just give a little bit more context and make the story as ridiculous as possible. The story is as bare bones as it needs to be to establish the setting the game takes place in, and that's it. That's all it needs to do for Doom 1993. It accomplishes that goal, and it creates an iconic setting for you to run around and kill demons in. That's about it. And it doesn't need to be anything more than that, because that's not what Doom is about. Like I said, I have a feeling that we'll get more lore narrative stuff as the series goes on. I'd have to play Doom 2. It's on my list to play as well. I'd also like to check out Doom Eternal and Doom the Dark Ages, because I have not played those games yet, even though I really loved Doom 2016. I just haven't gotten around to playing those two sequels. This might be a shorter episode today because I touched on above the things that I like to think about when I think about FPS in terms of what Doom did, and I touched on the one legacy part, and I touched on the one story, plot, lore aspect part that I found was kind of interesting in terms of Doom's development. Doom's development has a lot of like technical stuff, mumbo jumbo in it that I don't, again, really understand. I'm not a tech guy. I don't really focus on the tech side of it. So where does this leave us with the legacy of Doom? Like I said at the start of the episode, I had always dismissed Doom and the boomer shooters, but learning what I have today for this podcast, Doom is what I would consider the foundation of what is arguably the most popular genre of video game today. Everything that Doom did and established, most other shooters today either emulate or iterate on the gameplay and mechanics that Doom introduced to everybody. The success of Doom would go on to inspire id Software's other projects. There would be more Doom games, and we'd get a game called Quake, whose engine would go on to be used and inspire legendary games like Half-Life, Team Fortress, and Counter-Strike. Games that are foundational to the history of Valve and Steam and are also very highly regarded in terms of what they are in the FPS genre. Doom would return in 2016, developed by id and published by Bethesda. Doom 2016 was actually the first Doom game I ever played, like I said, and now having played the original, I have to say, 2016 does a great job of keeping the spirit of the original intact. It focuses on blistering movement, brutal gunplay, and it's tied together with great level design and enemies. Again, the three things that I pinpointed in my analysis of the way that Doom 1993 plays. And as I mentioned, Doom 2016 would be the start of a brand new modern Doom trilogy that would go on to have two sequels, Doom Eternal and Doom the Dark Ages, two games that I have not played yet, but I am very, very interested in checking out at some point. When I have free time, I'm interested in checking out all the Doom games from now. I want to check out Doom 2. I want to check out the new modern Doom games. I want to get my hands on everything that is Doom related and learn more about the series and see how it continues to iterate on itself and continues to push the boundary and establish what FPS should be, the best qualities of FPS are. My respect for Doom has grown immensely, and my formerly dismissive attitude towards it kind of makes me feel stupid as I record this last legacy portion. Regardless if you're a shooter fan or not, I know a lot of people in our community don't really regard shooters as high up as I do. Even if you're not a shooter fan, if you are just an appreciator of video game history overall, if you're into the way that the industry has evolved since its infancy in the 70s and early 80s to where it has come today, Doom is one of those landmark games. It's a game that is very clearly delineated on the timeline of video games as a whole. It's a landmark. It's something that when discussing where games came from, what games are important, it's something that probably comes up in those types of conversations. And similar to what I said about Chrono Trigger, you know, my analysis of it, my opinion of it does not take that away. It is what it is. Just like you don't tell the story of platformers or the early industry without Mario, you don't tell the story of FPS and video games without Doom. It's that level of a game. It's an iconic foundation upon which other giants are built, with the names of John Carmack and John Romero and the rest of the team who made it etched into that very foundation that holds up what that genre is today. I have no doubt about that. And once again, my curiosity has proven that my formerly dismissive attitudes towards Doom and towards the earlier FPS genre are stupid. And I'm glad that I've been able to continue to grow and evolve my thoughts, my opinions, my analysis on what video games are, fill in my gaps in my understanding of video game history. And Doom is just another piece of that puzzle. And I think by playing Doom once again, my appreciation for the medium has grown my appreciation for a genre that I don't play as much anymore, but I still hold very close to my heart. That appreciation has grown, and it's definitely given me a wider lens of where those games started and where they've come to today. And maybe by looking backwards, we can get some inspiration from Doom and get away from some of these like cookie cutter battle royale extraction shooters that seem to be flooding the market. Those are already established. Maybe we can emulate in some way Doom and return FPS to that fast-paced, well-designed structure that has so long defined what it means to be an FPS game. Thank you guys so much again for listening. If you've stayed till the end of this episode, this was a big one. I've had a couple of big ones since I've been back. Chrono Trigger and now Doom, games that defined this earlier era of video games that I'm constantly find myself diving into more and more as I learn more about the thing that I love and its earlier days, as opposed to staying in the more modern era, staying 2000 forward, where I feel most comfortable with my knowledge of video games. Challenging myself to learn how to talk about these different games and come at these games that have these gigantic legacy and find what I like about them and be able to analyze the parts of them that I think are valuable and interesting to me has been really rewarding. And it's especially been rewarding to try and figure out how to do that and keep these episodes within an hour-ish time span, because that's all that my schedule allows me to do right now. So it's really challenged me as a creator and as an appreciator of video games to learn how to make my thoughts more concise, less rambly, identify the parts of the game that I really want to talk about, and not waste time feeling like I have to cover every single aspect. Like I said, if I would have went down the rabbit hole of the development of this game and kind of the history of id Software, that is massive unto itself. And that might be a more focused episode on just the history of id and Carmack and Romero and all those guys. That would be its own episode by itself. And that might be worth researching one day for an episode if I ever want to talk about it or learn a little bit more about that. But for now, I think Doom has been a really important piece of this puzzle of me going back and experiencing earlier video games. And it's giving me a new lens and a new context through which I can view the things that I grew up playing and grew up loving. So thank you so much for sticking through to the end and hearing my thoughts about Doom. As I said at the top, if you want to connect with the show, the best way to do that is go to linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast. All the links to my social media are there. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram. I have an X account still, but I prefer Blue Sky just because X is constantly like serving me far right stuff in my suggestions, and I'm like, no, I don't really want to do that. I found Blue Sky to be much more just conversational and relaxed. I don't have an overwhelming sense of dread every time I open the app. So apart from the overwhelming sense of dread that you get that you're wasting too much of your time on social media anyways, and that the seconds of your valuable life are ticking away as you doom scroll unto eternity. So check out all those social medias. Go and check out the Unlockables YouTube page. We've got some awesome stuff coming, or that has come. I had a companion essay for Chrono Trigger that I did that I'm really, really proud of. I have a video on Clair Obscur Expedition 33 coming, and I have some stuff coming in December that I'm really excited to showcase on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, and if you watch any videos, please like, because that helps out too. And the last thing I would like to highlight is the Unlockables Patreon. For $1, you can have access to the Patreon. You'll get a special role in the Discord, access to a special Discord channel. You'll get access to the episodes early, and sometimes I post the episodes really early, like months in advance. And anything extra I decide to do that I view as outside the bounds of the main feed, I will post on the Patreon, and you will have access to it. You can support at $1 or the $3 tier. If I do anything that's a little bit more involved, maybe a little bit more higher value production, that will be limited to the $3 tier. But most everything that I put out will be accessible in either tier. It means so much if you choose to support the show a little bit extra, and it really, really helps me out to kind of support hosting costs. And then I use some of the money to get games and play games and analyze them for the show. So that really means a lot to me that you guys are willing to support that little bit extra. But for now, this episode is going to come to a close. Always remember, it's not just the story of video games, it is the story of you.
Yeah, Steve, stay cool here. Now listen, you don't need to go to Mars to battle your demons. That's rookie talk. That's propaganda. You think demons wear name tags and hang out in space labs? Hell no. They wear Axe body spray and text your girlfriend at 2 in the morning. Doom is real. Doom is a Tuesday morning when your car gets declined at the gas station off of I-80. And this ain't therapy, Evan. This is guidance from a guy who's lived in 3 storage units in a Planet Fitness bathroom stall. So my car gets declined, I gotta hitchhike. Thumb out, middle of nowhere. Coyote staring at me like it knows what I've been through. When a guy in a 93 Saturn picks me up, a real quiet type, but he keeps asking me if I have a name that I dance under, if I have any services to offer. And, I don't say no. I just stare ahead, start muttering Doom cheat codes like it's a rosary. We rode for about 6 hours, 7. Didn't talk after what happened. We just, understood each other. Demons are personal. They're intimate. I reckon Doom understands that. It's not about saving the world, it's about just getting through the hallway. You know, finding the right key cards to slip in the door jam. But sometimes you gotta walk into a room and shut the door and pull out a big fucking gun to make those demons go away. If you know what I mean, Evan. And not to scare them or anything, but to end the conversation. And that's what Doom taught me. Don't wait for hell to come to you. Kick down the door first. Thanks for having me on, Evan. I appreciate you. Say hi to your friends.